So previously we were studying the Alfred Russel Wallace contribution in the zoogeographical regions, and we searched out and discussed some of the points of Wallace. And now we are discussing about the division, that how he divided some of the regions into different continents or into different oceans. So Alfred Rullus is referred as father of zoo geography, okay, because he contributed a lot in the division of zoo geographical regions, and then he divided six zoogeographical regions into sub-regions. Okay, each region contained the four regions, like Palearctic region contain European, Mediterranean, Siberian, and Manchurian region. Ethiopian region contains East Africa, West Africa, South Africa, and Malagasy. Ethiopian region contains all of the African regions, and Oriental regions contain Indian, Ceylonese, Indo-Chinese, Indo-Malaysian. Australian region contains Indo-Australian region that we discussed in the last lecture, and Austromalline, Australian Polynesian region. Neotropical region contains Chilean, Brazilian, Mexican, and Antillean region. And the Arctic region contains subregions Californian, Rocky Mountains, Allegheny, and Canadian. Okay. Now, Wallace, what did Wallace do? He considered traveling into the Indo-Australian region. Like I said in the Darwin's theory, that when Darwin was on the route to Galapagos Islands, Wallace did also traveling to Indo-Australian regions, and he discovered many of the fauna of these regions and was particularly concerned about the location of the Oriental and Australian faunas. Because Oriental region contain Indian region and Australian region contain obviously Australian fauna. So that is why in 1863, he decided to that the line should run from east of the Philippines, that the starting from the Indo-Australian regions, Philippines, south between Borneo and Celebes, and then between Bali and Lombok. He cut the line, like he divided and distributed the area between Philippine and Borneo, south of the Borneo, and Celeb and Bali and Lombok. Okay, and then in 1876 he elaborated his work in the book Island Life in 1880. And in 1910, his book, The Worm of Life, changed his mind and about the affiliation of Celebes. Celebes is the region. His original line is the one generally called Wallace's line. Actually, he cut out the line. He just pointed out the areas of Philippines, Borneo, Celebes, Bali, and Lombok. And in this region, in this Indo-Australian region, he marked the fauna of the animals. And later on, after 1910, he changed the line, and that was generally called Wallace's line. Now we are talking about the modifications and enhancements made to Wallace's scheme, that what schemes he did made and what scientists were cooperating with him during his work. Okay, Angelo Halperin in 1887, he with the help of Wallace's scheme that was discussed earlier, he suggested the union of Nearctic and Palearctic region into a huge Holarctic realm. Yani ke Holarctic realm are the part of the Palearctic region and Nearctic region due to the similarity between the Holarctic realm and Palearctic and Nearctic flora and fauna. He just united these regions and divided the whole, you say, Nearctic and Palearctic region, flora and fauna into Holarctic, Ethiopian, Oriental, Australian, and Neotropical region. If someone is not understanding, then please tell me, I will elaborate further. Edward Lewis Trussert in 1890. He then further divided the sub-regions, and then he added two more regions, that is Arctic and Antarctic. These were the regions present early before the Charles Darwin theory, but he considered it in their books and make them the large continental regions for their flora and fauna. And KP Schmidt in 1954, he again divided the world into three regions: Arctogia, Holarctic, Ethiopian, Oriental. Yani कि Arctogia region contain Holarctic, Ethiopian and Oriental region, and Notogia contain Australian region, and Neogea yani कि that was the New World. Neogea, New World, Neotropical region. Everyone has divided separately the whole entire world into different regions. Got that? So according to everyone, someone's personal point of view, they just divided the regions according to themselves. But the valid theory was of Alfred Russel Wallace theory, and that is still continue in today's world, and scientists use this theory of Alfred Russel in their new zoogeographical distribution of the regions. Okay. Now that is the contribution of Philip Jackson Darlington. Once there was a Philip back we studied yesterday, and he divided the whole world into the 6 regions like Ethiopian, Palearctic, Nearctic, Neotropical region. But now the other one scientist in 1957 with Philip Darlington published his book Zoogeography, the geographical distribution of animals. Although this his book was based on patterns, like this place belongs to this fauna and these species. He just made the patterns, demonstrated them according to their terrestrial and freshwater vertebrates. Like they also include mammals of the freshwater vertebrates, and some of the amphibians, some of the reptiles and other terrestrial organisms, and birds too. They represented milestone because it was the first time in the 20th century. Like this book was this book contained a lot of information about those animal groups that had been gathered together, and this book contained a lot of information about the animal fauna. That is why it is called the milestone in the 20th century. Okay, now just talk about the fossil vertebrates. Obviously, when they search and observe and demonstrated about the fauna of the regions, current fauna of the regions, then they also studied fossil record, and they also did explain these fossil records in their books. And Darlington in 1957 emphasizes the major worldwide patterns of vertebrate animals, indicated a series of geographical radiation from the old world tropics. Like yesterday we studied old world and new world. Okay, the old world contained most of the fossil records. Almost all of the fossil records contain old world, and new world contains the new species that originate after the old world. Okay, so such radiations were considered to take place because competitively dominant animals were continually moving out from the tropical center of the region. So he then presented the schemes of different zoogeographical regions, and these schemes are now using in the current zoogeographical division of the scientists, by the scientists. First scheme was Realm Megaga. Actually, they divided Arctogia region into different subtropical regions. The main part of the world is Arctogia region that contain highly domesticated animals, highly flora and fauna, and it is the main part of the world. So Ethiopian region contain most of the Africa, Asia, America, and part of the South Arabia. Oriental region contain tropical Asia, associated continental islands, as you are seeing. And Nearctic region contain North America, excepting the tropical part of the Mexico. And now Realm Neogea. Realm is the basically division of the different subcontinental parts and division of the earth. So just don't confuse realm. And now Neogea, yani ke new world, new tropical region, South and Central America with the tropical part of the Mexico. Nearctic region was the North America part of the Mexico but neotropical was the South and Central America. So just don't mix up the regions. They are the important MCQs and important short questions. And now if we see Notogia, Australian region, Australia, Indo-Australian region, New Guinea. Acha, it was the first scheme in which he divided the different main part of the worlds into, he actually elaborate the whole world into Megaga, Neogea, and Notogia regions. And now his second scheme, that firstly he do the distribution of the animals, and now there are some climatic factors that also affect the distribution of flora and fauna, and also the regions, like an Antarctic region is full of ice and cold. A very rare species are present there, but he distributed, and he also considered climatic limited regions. And he, according to the second scheme, the climate limited regions were Palearctic and Nearctic region, and the main regions of the old world tropics, Oriental and Ethiopian. It is not of the new world, it is of the old world. And barrier limited regions are the neotropical and Australian regions. Why they are called barrier limited? Because there are very barrier present in this region that are useful in migrate, that are not useful actually in migrating the birds, especially the watery animals, due to the cliffs, due to the barriers, and due to the huge mountainy areas. And now if we study about the impact of the theories of continental drift and plate tectonics theory, this is also the history of zoogeographical regions, that plate tectonic theory was like plates were distributed, a volcano eruption occurs, and then earth was divided into different plates. There was a layers like lithosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere. They were formed, and then core mantle crust was formed. Actually, according to science, it was formed later on, but in as a Muslims, we believe that when Allah made them, and the starting of the earth, it was already present. Okay, between 1910 and 1912, some of the scientists just viewed and just considered the continental drift theory and searched about these, like scientists like Frederick Taylor Baker and Alfred Lusser Wegener. These are the new scientists. Actually, Alfred Russell is the previous one, and Alfred L. Wegener is the new one, had all advanced views about continental drift. Okay, it was proposed earlier. Between 1915 and 1929, Wagner published 4 editions of his book, The Origin of Continents and Oceans. Like he just described about continental drift theory, plate tectonics theory. He just described the oceanic animals, oceanic fauna, and continents. He just considered the previous theories of different scientists like Philip, Russell, Charles Darwin, etc. And then he published his own book with addition of oceans. He added oceans in his book. Okay, this works created considerable controversy. It was not actually the truest thing. Still now in this world, it is still an exception that there are some more regions, some more continents, and some more flora and fauna present in the regions, but still it is valid and it is considered as controversy. But most geologists and geophysicists, that are geophysicists are the physicians of earth, that are still not convinced. According to his book, The Origin of Continents and Oceans, research into paleomagnetism, like fossil record, it belongs to fossil record that began to offer some supporting evidence for drift theory. They used fossil record to search about the continental drift theory. Harry H. Henner has suggested that the sea floors crack, sea floor, like oceanic floors, they were cracked due to volcanic eruptions and the crest of the mid-ocean ridges, and then new seafloor forms there and separate apart on either side of the crest. Like the crest was formed and ocean was separated, seafloor was separated, and hence the species, the flora matlab aquatic plants and the fauna, aquatic animals were distributed equally on the both sides. Uh, you may say that cliffs were also formed as a crest. And then Robert S. Dertz named this process seafloor spreading and coupled with it the suggestion that the seafloor is absorbed beneath zones of deep ocean. Like he said, Robert said that seafloor was actually was previously discovered, was previously formed beneath the zones. But when the crust forms, then it rises up and showed and divided the two oceans. But according to the Harry, he says that the ocean was arise after the crest was formed. So these are some of the critical and complex things that you may understand and read the notes so you will completely understand them. Okay. uh, Uzo Wilson in 1963 and 1973, he noted the oceanic islands tended to increase in age, like cliffs were formed and oceans were expanded and expanded. Hotspots were formed, existed where string of volcanic islands have been formed. Like volcanic eruptions also exist. After volcanic eruptions, after volcanoes, oceans made, glaciers destroy, or mountains formation occurs and mountains destroys. So they considered the volcanic islands, and they think that volcanic islands were formed after the ocean ridges. These and other discoveries led to the modern view of plate tectonic theory. Continental drift theory was the earliest theory, and then plate tectonic theory was formed on the basis of the volcanoes. And Earth's division, Earth crust, is divided into mosaic of shifting plates. Yes, you have to be studied history. Otherwise, you will not know what are the zoo geographical regions, how they distributed, and where they are now, their present location. So history is must, and it is also included in your syllabus. So that is why it's a long question, and I have to teach you all. So the plate tectonic revolution in earth science had a gradual but decisive effect on biogeography. Okay. That's good, Kiran. So we just studied continental drift theory, then we studied matlab we will study plate tectonic and continental drift theory in a long discussion in the next few topics or lectures, but now we are just discussing about the history of them. So the plate tectonic and continental relationships, yani कि continental drift theory was lasting 700 million years ago. It was not a billion years ago, it was a million years ago. And then plate tectonic revolution in earth was gradually formed, and this affect the biogeography. Like, look, when volcanoes erupted, obviously there was a fire, there was a destruction, there was a destruction of mountains, oceans. So the animals also affected, biogeography also affected, plants are affected, the oceanic animals, they may destroy, their death occurs, some of the animals may extinct due to the volcanic eruptions. So that is why the plate tectonic theory, when come and when studied, the scientists also observed that it has a huge devastative effect on the biogeography. Previously it had been necessary to discuss the history. Now look, that why history is very important. It is being necessary to discuss the historical relationships of the biogeographical region, so that if any one of you, like if you are you my students, if you are something interested in the zoogeographical regions, you may continue your study further in this because it is your major. And when you will study further, if you are willing to study, I am not imposing this on you, so you may study about the biogeographical regions, and this will help you then. So okay, the Visarians model. Visarians refers to the biogeographic patterns. Firstly, we study geographical regions, their division. Then we study why it is formed, their schemes in today's world, in previous world. Then we studied old world, new world. Okay, now we are discussing about the biogeographical patterns present in between these geographical regions, that how the fauna, how the flora was affected and is still affecting by the volcanic eruptions, by the human interaction. So Vesarians refers to biogeographical patterns produced by a particular kind of allopatric speciation in which a geographic barrier develops. Okay, so that it separates a formally continuous population. Barrier, what are barriers formed for? Why are barriers formed? Barriers are formed to separate the two things. Okay, so that the flora or fauna on one side remains on that side and the other remains on their side. But these barriers put a huge impact on migrational animals, migrational birds, especially land and terrestrial animals. Birds can fly, they can use barriers, they can easily accommodate them, but in case of animals, they can't fly. They just have to move a long distance so that they may reach to their original place. But the geographical barriers they were developed actually very earlier, but they were studied in 1970s then. So don't confuse that the barriers actually developed in 1970. Barriers were developed a very million years ago. This distinguishes Visarianism from the kind of allopatric speciation which takes place as the result of migration or dispersal of individuals. And across an existing barrier to colonize the other side, uh, like they just firstly recognize the previous barriers. They studied that how the fauna was separated and what impacts were present on their bodies, on their reproduction, and then they emphasize the new barriers. And what is allopatric speciation? It is a speciation that happens when two populations of the same species become isolated. Let me tell you in the simplest way that when the same species get separated from each other according to some barriers, then allopatric speciation occurs. Okay, so the proponents of Visarianism emphasizes that it was really Visarians that produced geographical differentiation. Visarianism is the scientist somehow, and multiplication of species. He just gave a very complex view of the division of the animals and barriers. So Croizet et al. In 1974, he stated the existence of races or subspecies that are separated by barriers means that a population has subdivided or is subdividing, not that the dispersal has occurred or is occurring across the barriers. Let me elaborate you this, that Criset et al. Gave this statement on the basis of barriers that were present. He just stated that look, if the just rohu fish species was present on the eastern side, okay, just present on the eastern side, but the barrier comes suddenly occurred due to some volcanic eruption or due to some other thing. The barrier just occurred between the eastern side and the rohu species just separated and from each other, and half of the species were on the left side and half of the species were on the right side. So they divided. Then these fish species, with the interaction of other oceanic water, other oceanic species, they just made their way to some other side, and then they developed there, they migrate there, they, you say, they just breed there, and hence the population was widely distributed. I think you all are understanding that how the population was distributed, that species on the left or on the right side equally breed, and hence the population was separated and divided. So only certain kind of allopathic speciation has occurred in the history, and as proposed by Darwin, species originate in a specific place and then disperse to new regions. Obviously, जैसे कि हमने we studied in the Darwin's theory that finches were firstly in that first region, then they travel to Galapagos region, migrate to Galapagos region. Actually, the parental genes were the same as in the previous region, but the new genes added and then the species changed. Okay, parental regions are the same, just speciation changes, like your forefathers. You have different forefather, then grandfather, then father, and then yourself. You know that how the parental gene is same, but when the reproduction occurs generation after generation, that shape, sizes, coloration also differs, and it also matters. That is the dispersion and barrier theory. And now modernization of zoo geography, like he elicit approach. In this, there is a modernization of zoo geography in today's world. According to some paleontological evidence, it can be said that both dispersal and westernism have each played an important role in historical biogeography. Okay. For example, the Isthmus of Panama was finally completed in the Pleistocene. It separated the tropical marine environment of the New World into two parts. इसमें याद रखने वाली क्या बात है? You have to learn all that. If someone questioned you that what was the theory of Philip and Darlington, what will you describe? You will state it all this theory. These are the MCQs also, that in which region, which scientist contributed in which region, that which region was distributed further, which region was divided further, and what is the contributions in the new geographical modernization geographical regions. uh, Isthmus of Panama was finally completed in the plans. It is the important MCQ. It separated the tropical marine environment of the New World into two parts. He just distributed the marine environment into Eastern Pacific and Western Atlantic. There finally comes the oceans. Okay. So these are some of the biogeographical and zoogeographical regions you must study. And thank you.